Welcome everyone to the sacred hockey mask, where it might not be safe to run in the woods at night. Although you probably shouldn't do that anyway. There's a lot of weirdos and animals and all sorts of things that will kill you. But this is a horror movie podcast. I am Peter. I'm joined, as always, by
Lady Shasha, Mistress of the Snark.
Mistress of the Snark. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Snark. But yes, welcome to the show. This is yet another review show. We've watched the movie. We're going to talk about it. It's quite that simple. We're checking out one of the more buzziest films of last year, The Empty Man, which I had not heard about at all. I just all of a sudden there was buzz on Twitter talking about this Empty Man. I went in completely blind. I saw the poster, which is just the title, basically. There's no images on it. So I had no idea even really what genre this was going to be, like what subgenre. Obviously it was going to be horror. I'm not a complete idiot, but but I didn't know anything beyond that. So this was a complete blind first viewing for me. Although I think you'd already seen this like last year or earlier this year.
Yeah, I watched it last year.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see how you feel in a second time viewing then. The first thing, I was saying this before we started, but the first thing that shocked me was the runtime. I had almost a mini heart attack when I saw it was 2 hours and 17 minutes, which right away puts me on the back end where I'm like, movie, you're going to have to justify this. You're going to have to be good enough that I'm not annoyed that you took so much time. So we'll see we'll see how that goes. But before I get to my thoughts. The general premise, there's a bit of a prologue sequence, which is actually quite long, but the general premise, once the movie gets going, is we have an ex-cop who's investigating the disappearance of his neighbor's teenage daughter, who might be involved in something cult-like, and there's also kind of a superstitious mythology going around about the summoning of something called the Empty Man, right? Think, little candy man, little... I hate to say it, but it's a little bye-bye man as well.
Yeah.
It's not fair to any movie to be like, hey, compare it to the Bye Bye Man, but there's a little bit of that there. So, yeah, that is the basic gist of it. Shasha, what did you think, or what are your general feelings on The Empty Man?
I really like the opening. The opening completely subverted my expectations because I didn't expect the whole hike. When I first turned on, I thought I turned on the wrong movie, to be honest. when they were hiking and then they found the cave, and I was like, am I watching the right movie? Because I did see the trailer, and in the trailer it showed the bridge scene with the teens on the bridge.
Yeah.
So when the movie opened with this other group of people hiking, I really thought I had clicked on the wrong movie. But I really liked that part of the movie a lot. I was like, I wish that was the movie.
So,
and then
opening 20 minutes
on from there.
yeah, so the opening 20 minutes really solid, but then
and then it goes on from there, and it becomes a little bit more formulaic.
What's so funny is that because I went in completely blind, I legitimately thought the whole movie was going to be these hikers like hiding in this like a little cabin in the mountains when they're trapped there. Obviously, there's something freaky that happens. I don't want to get into, because as much as it's the start of the movie, it also is kind of spoilery as well to get into it in depth. But basically, one of them, something weird happens to one of them, and they're kind of stuck there in the snow during a storm in the mountains, and they're not like, I don't remember what country it was. Was it like Malaysia or something like that? It was.
I didn't write it down.
I didn't write it down either. But regardless, they're in a foreign country. They're in the mountains, and I genuinely thought, oh, this is going to be them trapped here for 2 hours, and we're going to like have them slowly going mad or something like that. And then like it very suddenly comes to a big end after about 20 minutes, and then the title screen comes up, and I even tweeted out that having your title screen appear 22 minutes into your movie,
I wrote it down too,
is some serious like big dick energy, right? It's like the filmmaker's like, look at how I'm so confident in my movie that I'm hitting you with a title this late into it. So I is what it is. I have to say I'm pretty disappointed in the movie. I was half expecting, I wasn't, because I didn't know how you felt about it, so I was kind of coming in here thinking, we might actually be at odds on this. This might be the first one where we kind of not fight, but like have a proper debate over the good and the bad. But yeah, I think there's like specific moments that are good, like here or there. But for the most part, and this is all complete spoilers, so I can't say it until we get past spoilers what it is specifically. But this movie goes down a path that is a very specific type of subgenre that I just don't like that much, and it's full of a lot of tropes, and it's full of a lot of kind of by the numbers. It's generally better directed than something like a Bye Bye Man, and it's generally got better elements than some other really crappy horror movies. So I think there's at least some skill that's went into this one. But ultimately, it takes 2 hours after that opening 20-minute sequence, which is kind of separate. It takes 2 hours to tell a story that ultimately just turns into a very similar type of movie to one or two other examples that I also don't like that much. So part of it might be taste, but I wasn't that into it.
Yeah, I think it's execution because I like the premise of the movie. And I like that it gets it. Well, I can't say that because that's a spoiler of what it gets into. But I think it had a good story, but the execution was it didn't add anything new. It's like you've seen it a million times before. It's not interesting anymore. But you actually had an interesting concept that you took and made boring.
I think I'm actually kind of the opposite. I think there's actually moments of okay direction. I mean, not the whole movie. There's definitely moments where it does do just the typical thing. But there are some moments where I think it's well enough directed to a point. I think the concept, though, it's very rare a movie with the concept that this has, with where it goes by the end, works for me. I'm usually just like, by the time I realize it's going down this path, I usually lose all interest. And it's just not my thing. There's one or two very specific exceptions that I could maybe give that are kind of similar in a way, but those specific exceptions are directed by some of the most prolific directors that have ever lived, who are and very specific in their style and have their own kind of vibe. But most of the other examples, and including movies that people like, this is not the only movie with a sort of premise like this that I have disagreed with the mass opinion on. So I guess I'll keep that in mind, keep that little caveat in mind with everything I say, I guess, from this point on. But yeah, I have to say I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in The Empty Man. There's moments where there's some dodgy CG, which is a trope. Well, it's not even a trope. It's just a fault of the modern horror movie with something supernatural going on, and yeah, yeah.
That's why I compared it to Slender Man, because that one also had really bad CGI.
Obviously, it's very different once it actually gets to the point of where it's going. But it's kind of pretending it's Slender Man for a while. It's pretending that it's kind of a Slender Man movie to a point, and then it kind of does its own thing. Well, it's not really its own thing. It pivots into another type of movie. So, yeah, I feel like we just have to go to spoilers early on this one.
Because it's hard to have this well, I will say one thing that we forgot to mention. The opening sequence for the first 20 minutes takes place in 1995, and then it jumps forward to 2015 for the duration of the movie.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, it was in the 2010 somewhere. That happens, which is fine. And I kind of like how it loosely ties into the rest of the movie, where it does come back up again in a little bit, which, fair play. At least conceptually, I guess I'm into that, but that's kind of about it, unfortunately. I mean, there's so many things, and I'd say it's a little bit better than most of the other movies that do a lot of the things that this movie does that I hate, right? It's a little bit better at those Slender Man style moments than Slender Man was. It's a little bit better than the ex-cop investigation of the creepy thing that leads to like a convoluted mystery, right? It's a little bit better than other examples of that type of story, but none of it can actually overcome the story that it is, which is just like those other movies. And sadly, here we are with my crushing disappointment. So I guess I'll just give the warning. We're quite early on in this one, but full spoilers for The Empty Man, so we can actually talk about what's going on. The obvious place to start is that opening 20-minute sequence. I think, I'll give this movie one thing. It has two very good, and the word I like to use here, but typically if I like a scene with stabbing in it, this is really morbid, but typically if I like a scene with stabbing in it, it's because it's visceral, and it's fast, and it feels really stabby. Right? There's two scenes in this movie like that. One of them's in the opening chunk, right towards the end of it. So basically what happens in this opening section is we have these hikers. One of them falls into a crevice after they've crossed the bridge, and the other guy goes down to get him because it's the two couples, and the other guy goes down to get him, and he gets down there, and he's staring at this kind of skeletal sculpture that's on the wall. I would say it's like almost Giger-esque, except for the
Hmm.
fact that it's not phallic, but it does remind me of like some of the things you might get in the
Yeah.
walls in an Alien movie or something like that. And he's not sitting; he's like just sitting there with his legs crossed, like just catatonically, and he's like mumbling whispery words and things like that. And they don't know what's going on with them, so he picks him up. They rope him up it through. They find this little cabin just in time for the storm that's hitting the area, and they're trapped here. And the guy who's been affected, he won't say anything, he won't do anything. He's just there, and this takes place over 3 days. Where the first day they hear whispers of something.
Hmm.
The second day, the girlfriend or the wife or whatever the specific relation is to the guys in the catatonic state, she actually sees a figure, this mysterious figure in the snow. And I actually quite like this visual. I thought this visual of like the almost complete whiteout of the snow and the blizzard,
Yeah.
and just this all black, cloaky kind of figure in the wind coming. A little CG, but it was obscured enough that I was like, okay, it's got a creepy
Hmm.
kind of touch. And then on the third day, the catatonic man's like snuck out whilst they were asleep. So they go looking for him. He's at the bridge they crossed previously, and it's like he's hypnotized or like mind like controlled his girlfriend, who just pulls out a knife and starts stabbing the others and kills them and throws
Hmm.
them down the cliff. And then she herself jumps off, and he's left. And that's when it just like it's like cut to black. The empty man, right? But that's like 22. I mean, what's your other thoughts on this opening
I
20
really
minutes?
like the best part of the movie is the opening to me. I think it started out so promising when that happened. Aside from them putting the credits 22 minutes into the movie, I thought it was a really good start to a movie. I said, "Oh, well, this looks interesting. I wonder what's going to happen next." And then we get the whole. I'll let you know right now. I am not a fan of police procedurals and horror movies, except for maybe two movies, Seven and Saw, because it kind of made well. In Seven, that was like the main thing about the movie was the police are trying to figure out why this killer is doing what he's doing. Oh, and Silence of the Lambs. But other than that, I don't like a lot
Honestly,
of police.
I will counter that by saying that I wouldn't consider Seven or Silence of the Lambs a horror movie. I would consider them thrillers, and that's why they work as cop movies. Uh,
Mm,
like because I agree. Like for whatever reason, it doesn't work when you have a cop investigating a horror movie.
hmm.
It's almost always just this like, no, this doesn't work. Like I don't, and it usually leads to the sort of twist that we get in this movie, and I don't like it.
Hmm.
I hate the twist in
And
this movie.
they literally ruined the Hellraiser series by
I
inserting these cops.
know.
Like,
After
why?
after the fourth Hellraiser movie, like at least every one that I've seen since after that point, it's all been a detective or a journalist
Hmm.
who equally is just investigating something. It's the same thing. It's the same damn thing,
Hmm.
right? And it's just every one of them sucked. Oh yeah,
Hmm.
it, it's bad times, bad times. No, I agree. The opening 22 minutes is the strongest like portion. It's not that I wouldn't say I love everything in the opening 22 minutes. There is definitely some rough edges. I think I can tell that the actors who were cast for this section aren't as good as the actors who come later because they knew they were only there for the small parts in the first 20 minutes.
Hmm.
Because as much as I prefer the plot in this opening 20 minutes, I did notice that some of the acting from particularly the girlfriend who kind of gets put in the trance. Like I thought her acting
Hmm.
was a bit ropey and felt a little bit melodramatic, and I think that's one of these cases where they cast the roles that were going to fill 2 hours of the movie with more effort, and they put more thought into who they were casting there, and paying more money for, I presume. So, uh, it's not perfect, but it's definitely a very interesting mystery, and it's just like okay, he's landed next to this supernatural thing that's infected him, and he's like spreading dread and the need to murder throughout his loved ones, and that's interesting, and it's dark, and I will say this: the one thing I like about the rest of the movie from a concept thing, it's the same thing I kind of like about that. Well, I say I love about Prince of Darkness and
Hmm.
a few other movies, but that's the one that comes to mind. Is the idea that this is truly apocalyptic? That this idea that this thing that's spreading the empty man will actually just lead to the entire world just being screwed. Like it's the end of days. It's that's how dire this is. there's like one brief moment in this movie where it made me feel like it might be going that direction, and it's the only time in that whole 2 hours that I got kind of excited. That I got kind of like,
Mhm.
oh, interesting.
Mhm.
Uh, but
Where there's one particular concept that I really, really liked in this movie, but I'll wait to talk about it because it doesn't pop up till towards the end of the movie.
sure, yeah, yeah. I hated almost everything at the end, so I'll be curious to see what it is. But uh, yeah, I mean, it starts off promising enough, I guess. Like, you're introduced to our main character, who's this ex cop by the name of uh, James Badgedale. That's a really bad name, actually. I didn't realize that was
For
his
a
name.
cop, and he has the
Yeah,
name, he has the term badge within his name.
his middle name is Badge.
Wow. It's like if you were a fireman and your middle name was
Oh,
Hose.
sorry. I've misread this. Sorry, that's the actor's name, not the character's name.
Oh, wow.
That
That's
might be
even
funnier,
funnier.
actually. Forgive me. Both the character and the actor are named James, so I got a little confused there.
Mhm.
The character is James Lazambra, uh,
Mhm.
and I'm sure there's some meaning. There's probably some like satanic meaning in that last name, just
Mhm.
because hints and Easter eggs and whatnot. But we're introduced to him, and he's a bit of a loner. He's a widower. His wife and child have died years previously. They're very vague as to how for the longest time. It's not until very late in the movie we find out it was a car accident. But we're interested in him. We're also interested in his neighbor, Nora, who I recognize that actress from a couple of things as well. And she's also lost her husband via a heart attack.
Oh.
And we're interested in her daughter, Amanda, who's actually a pretty prominent character in the film who we see very little of. We have one scene of her here with him, and she's speaking like she's joined a cult. So she's talking about a lot
Mhm.
of hairy fairy sort of nonsense. And then next day, her mother calls him, and she's missing. She's not there. And to be fair to it, I did think some of this earlier stuff was okay in that I thought the way it introduced us to her character, the Nora that is, where we see her
Mhm.
in her house on her own, and we see her just sort of quietly sort of get up and go up the stairs, and she's like looking for her daughter, and we don't see what she sees. So I mean, I think our assumption is maybe our dead body, if anything. And it's not until afterwards where he comes over, and because she's called him, and he comes in and he looks around, and she's just missing. But the words "the empty man made me do it" are like written in blood, like in the bathroom, and it's very obviously suspicious. So they call the police in and all the rest of it. And from there, that leads to an investigation where, because the police just see it as a runaway, they're not going to bother really trying to find her. So he takes it upon himself to investigate the case, and he goes to talk to all of her friends. Which again, this is some of this early stuff. This isn't anywhere nearly as long as the opening, but it is
Mhm.
kind of odd how this there's like a flashback here when he goes to speak to one of her friends, and she tells him this story about their night they had on this bridge, right? And this again felt like a big, like it's probably like 10 minutes long. I mean,
Mhm.
which may not sound like a lot, but in the context of a movie, to have one 10 minute scene is quite a lot. That's a lot of your real estate being taken up by this one scene. Um, and they tell us the legend of the Empty Man, which, admittedly, I think by the end of the movie, this is mostly bullshit. Like most of this
Mhm.
isn't actually that true because of what they're actually doing. But uh, Amanda convinces them that if they pick up a bottle, if they find an empty bottle on a bridge, and if they blow into it while thinking about the Empty Man, and this was, I'm not gonna lie, this was my first red flag. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
I don't know about this. This sounds very Bye Bye Man esque. And don't get me wrong, Candyman got away with it, right? Candyman did get away with it, but everything that's
Mhm.
tried to do this gimmick since has not worked.
And I think Candyman got away with it because it's really just a callback to Bloody Mary. And
Yes.
so many people have played that game as children or have been afraid of Bloody Mary. There was even a situation, I told it recently in one of my Friday the 13th reviews, because I was making fun of the fact that a lot of times in Friday the 13th movies, it's warm enough to swim, but cold enough to wear sweaters, apparently. And one of the Friday the 13th movies, everyone is wearing sweaters and overcoats. And I recall that in Connecticut, we do have winter camp. I say that because I'm coming back around to the story. I know you're like, where is she going with this?
I'm
This is
very,
my
I'm curious.
this is my ADHD mind. So my sister went to a winter camp, and one of the kids there did play Bloody Mary in the bathroom and came out with scratches all over her face, crying. So that might be real. I don't know, but there's something that worldwide is has that creepy story. Even in Japan, there is a Bloody Mary type character. So there's something in the social subconscious that makes you. Maybe it's just mirrors in general. Maybe mirrors are creepy to us on a subconscious level, and maybe this doesn't work because they didn't use a mirror.
Maybe I don't know. It's one of these things
Well,
where they
Prince
where
of Darkness used a mirror.
wait, what used the mirror?
Prince of Darkness, which you just like the scariest part of Prince of Darkness
Well, yeah,
is
but
that mirror.
well, yeah, but the mirror wasn't used to call a boogeyman. No, it wasn't say
No.
a name, and a mirror was used as a mechanical device, but it was used in a very different way in a very different context. But that's all of these details just felt very random, and like the bridge was cool because obviously they crossed the bridge in the opening sequence. So I was thinking, oh, okay, this connects it to that, spiritually. So the bridge must be an important element to this. But when it was just blow into it, any empty bottle that's been left lying, like, but this thing's meant to be hundreds, if not thousands, of years old. Like, glass bottles only go back so far, right? Well, this thing's meant to be basically eternal, right? What this thing comes from. So what happened when it was caveman times? When there was no glass bottles, and actually, to come to think of it, there was no built bridges either. Now that I'm truly thinking about this, so I don't know. Some of this just felt a little bit like, okay, I don't know. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but whatever. The scene's okay. The kids get a little bit creeped out a bit too easily because they hear a noise at the other end of the bridge, but I am a bit of a sucker for shots where it looks down like a long hallway or bridge, and it just goes into darkness and you can't really see what's coming. That works. I mean, it doesn't always work for me, but I tend to be easy enough to please with a shot like that. But when we come back to obviously present day, the detective goes around and tries to find these other kids that were all there, and he can't find them. And then when he can't find them, and the parents are all clearly worried about where they are, he goes to the bridge and ends up finding all of the kids, barring Amanda, and the one that he already talked to, hanging underneath the bridge, which obviously leads to the police coming in and all the rest of it. And on the same night, the girl he spoke to is at the sauna on her own, because sure, and stabs her own eye out with a pair of scissors. Like, she just stabs herself in the face repeatedly. Again, not bad scene. Now, she's from her perspective, we see the empty man, if you want to call him that, the cloaked figure. But in reality, she's just stabbing herself in the face. Thoughts on any of this stuff? Like,
I don't even know what to say about it. I didn't hate it. I didn't like it either. It was just mad. That's the term I would use. Is it happened? Stuff that happened. It was just okay.
I think I appreciate the bridge scene being at least a big, solid chunk, and I appreciate the visceral stabbing. Like I say, I like a good visceral stabbing, so I like that scene on its own. I think in hindsight, this section of the film benefits because I'm still expecting to like see why everyone loves it, right? Because it got a lot of buzz, so I'm like, okay, this is not. I mean, there's some things that I don't love about it so far, but it hadn't got like silly convoluted yet, which it was going to. There's to define a moment where I groaned, right? Because after this point, he starts investigating more thoroughly, and there's been like several references to this like institute of something. I can't remember the name of it, but basically the cult, right? The cult that all these kids, or at least Amanda, was going to. And he goes to investigate that, and he hears a bunch of creepy mumbo jumbo, and they're all like, all of our consciousness comes from the same place, and it's the nothingness, and yet there has to be an empty man, and blah blah blah, and they're all going on. The moment in the movie, though, right, this is jumping ahead a bit because a lot of this really blurs together in my head. This section when he's doing all the investigation, because honestly, it's not that interesting. And
now, the only thing that stands out is that he mentioned at least 3 or 4 times that he's from San Francisco.
Yeah, that felt really intentional as well. Is it? Do you know what it's like? Actually, it's like it's Agent Coulson and Agents of Shield. If you ever watched Agents of Shield, which is the show that kind of spun out of the Marvel movies, is that for the entire first season he keeps saying the sentence "Tahiti's a hell of a place," or it's a wonderful place, or it's a magical place. Sorry, Tahiti's a magical place. because the big question is how did he come? Because he died in the Avengers, so how did he come back? And all season he keeps saying that, and it ends up being like connected to how he came back, and it's kind of like a thing. So after he says, I grew up in San Francisco for the third time, and it's like, why do you keep saying that? You keep saying that when it's not really like someone says, there's a lot of weird stuff going on. You don't have to tell me. I grew up in San Francisco. What is San Francisco known for being a weird place? So very, very, very odd. But the moment that got to me though is that eventually he gets his hands. This is like 2/3 or so throughout the movie. He gets his hand on a file the cult had, and he opens the file, and it's a file on him, and they've got like, newspaper clippings of his life. They've got like various like photographs and heirlooms. They've even got a photograph of him sitting in a chair naked that he doesn't remember happening. But he's like, how can they have all this?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the moment in the movie where it completely lost me, and there was no going back, because this was the moment where I'm like, oh no, like it turned out he's created by them apparently, but even like, ignoring that part is like, oh no, everything that's happened in the movie up until this point is for him because they've chosen him for a special reason. And the second I had that realization, I hated everything the story was doing from that point on, because I do not like that reveal. I hate that twist. I hate it with. And it's not that there's never been a good example of it, right? I'm not saying there's no good examples, but for the most part, I tend to really hate it. And at that point, I lost all interest because every part of the investigation before this is now meaningless, because all of it's just spooky shit that they've set up to set him down a path. None of it has any real meaning anymore. Like, before it was like, oh, what do these clues mean? What does that lead to this thing or that lead to that? Now it doesn't matter. Because now it's all about just sending him down this rabbit hole to get to his end point. And none of it's that important, right? Just like those Hellraiser sequels, nothing means anything because it's just lots of random spooky shit. And it does start to feel like that. It feels like a lot of random set pieces. We get a teddy bear that moves. Like, oh, you saw this in another horror movie, didn't you? It has nothing to do with anything in this one, but you want a creepy moment where the teddy bear moves. So we're going to do that, just as an example. So, what's your take on all this nonsense?
Well, I that's the one thing that I do like about the writing was not just that twist, but there was another twist. I don't know if I'm getting too far ahead, but the final twist of him not being a real person at all, him being pretty much an experiment in tulpa creation.
I hated it in the movie. I'm not necessarily against it as a concept, but I'm going to say something controversial that I know a lot of people aren't going to like. I am not a fan of Jacob's Ladder. I do not like that movie.
Oh, I love Jacob's Ladder.
And I don't like it. I don't like the twist, and I don't like the. I don't want to say what it is. I don't want to spoil that movie, but I don't like that type of twist. And this to me was a very Jacob's Ladder-esque kind of twist, and I don't necessarily like. I kind of like the idea of the cult to a point, and I kind of like the idea as well of them. I don't like that the movie was framed as this investigation for spooky stuff to happening to then reveal all this at the end. Like, the concept done in a completely different lens through a different angle might work for me. It very well could. Like every concept has a take that'll work.
I would have loved to see them get more into the concept of tulpa creation and go into maybe the history of how the Empty Man came to be because for if people that don't want to look it up right quick, tulpa creation is the concept that if enough people believe something intensely enough, they can make that thing that they believe become a reality. So if they went into the lore of the Empty Man and how these people believed so much they created him, that would have been a more interesting story.
Yeah, like
kids, you could have used the kids spreading it, make it something that they learned on the internet, and they all start spreading it to each other, on social media, to the point where they all start believing that this thing exists that didn't.
Yeah, I'm not like I kind of get what you're saying about liking the tulpa idea. I think the tulpa element of it is actually fine, but the movie just sort of tacks that on at the end like a twist, right?
Yeah.
Rather than it being about that. And I get that you kind of want someone to realize, oh, that's what I really am, kind of thing. But I just, when he tries to call the neighbor who he was having an affair with, and that's why he felt guilty about his wife and son's death because he was too busy having sex with her on the day of her husband's funeral. Which, by the way, that flashback when you see them having sex after the funeral, and at one point they're kissing, but it's like he's got like part of like her dress like over her face, and they're kissing through the fabric. I'm like, this is stupid.
Yeah, that was just weird.
This is just stupid.
Whoever thought that was sexy, fire them. No.
Maybe it's just maybe intense, they're grieving. They're grieving and horny. This is a mix of complicated emotions that you can't quite work out. I don't know. The whole, I don't know. It just for me, it made everything that came before it feel fairly meaningless. And the problem is that as soon as it was like they chose him, so everything was being orchestrated to send him down this path, it already kind of felt meaningless. And there's nothing I hate more than like the feeling for like half of a movie where I realize that we're building up to a twist that's going to make a lot of what we're doing just kind of redundant, or a lot of it just feel like, oh, it was spooky for the sake of being spooky until we get to kind of the point we want to make at the end. And it's a fine line to walk. Like I don't have the answer to when it does work, when you have the twist that happens that does change the context of everything. I guess it boils down to, oh, all of a sudden everything that came before has a different meaning, and that's interesting because now I'm rethinking about the Sixth Sense is obviously the example that everyone goes to, but it's a good example for a reason, because every single scene that's affected by that movie's twist, which I won't say just in case, but obviously most people know what it is. But all of a sudden, all of those scenes have a different meaning for what they are to that character. Now, once you have that information, so the second viewing is almost better because you're going through it and you're sort of reanalyzing everything on a new level. Whereas with this, there's a moment like halfway through, I'm like, this is building up to another twist, and I just like I don't trust anything that's happening. And it does that thing where towards the end he's going through like a sort of like dream state where he's like living like several different scenes back to back, and now there's no rules because it's just going through different sequences, it's going through different memories, and it's going through different, it's all of it's
and also
just clever.
it just made you feel like, what was the first 20 minutes about? They didn't have any callback to that. Like they didn't. It would make sense if they showed. I didn't feel like it connected. Well, like, was it just there just to show that the empty man was released? Was that their only purpose of that?
Well, no, they did, because the guy in the hospital, the John Doe, was the guy from the opening 20 minutes. And the idea is that the this force was dormant until he fell down there, 20 something years ago, and that's why this cult come and visit this John Doe in the hospital. They come here because he's like the vessel that gives them all of the, I don't know, the satanic oogledy-boogledy.
But
right?
How did they find him? Like, it was just was it a nurse that found out that he was, taken over by the empty man and told other people to come see him? Like, how did that get started?
I assume he whispered to one person, and then that person infected someone else, and then the ideas grew and spread. And
yeah, they should have shown that. They should have shown, him in the hospital whispering into a nurse's ear, and then you can come back to that years later, and you have the nurse with all these other people that they were missed. It's like they put all this extra stuff in, but didn't put in things that would connect the story better.
I mean, I don't mind part of it being a mist, because I don't think this particular element needs to be over explained, because once you see this guy in the hospital and you go, wait, is that him from the opening? Like, is this him the whole time? And then the way the cult are worshipping him, you're like, okay, you kind of put those two pieces together. And honestly, how it connects to the opening is fine for me. It's everything else. It's the, when he finally goes back to the hospital at the very end, and the neighbor, when he phones her, doesn't know who he is anymore, and that's where I'm rolling my eyes a lot, because I'm like, oh, I hate this ending. And he goes in, Amanda's there, and she's like, we need a new vessel. This guy who fell down this cave so many years ago, he was the vessel, but a human being, a human body, an empty man can only can have the power for so long to transmit these ideas and feelings to us. Because at one point they say, all consciousness share the same sort of larger consciousness, but it's not just humans' consciousness that's in there, it's other things too, presumably demons or spirits or whatever from other realms or beyond, or whatever you want to phrase it as. And she's like, so we had to so we tried something different, we tried to make one, and that's when it gets into the idea of that they made because it's like, hey, you're only 3 days old. Like when we met you at the start of the movie, that was you just came into existence. Everything before that's a lie, which is a very like I say, it's a little bit Jacob's. It's a little bit not obviously this wasn't a twist in the same way in this movie, but it's a little bit Matrixy. You know, your existence is kind of a lie, so you kind of have this shock realization. Um, uh, yeah, yeah, I hated the ending. Like the last like 10 to 20 minutes, like I was just like, I am so out of this now. Like I hate everything it's doing. Um, in the context of the movie, it's at the very least. In some cases, entirely. I just don't like the concepts that much. I hate the this was all in his head, or this is all just for him for the last 3 days, and every bit of the mystery was just a carefully laid breadcrumb to lead him down this path. And
So then it makes you wonder: did the kids even exist that he talked to and saw hanging on the bridge? Did any of that happen?
yeah, were real people actually dying?
Yeah.
And if they were, then okay. I mean, I guess it makes sense that they were because I guess Amanda did that to her friends, like because she was already like into this cult and was a firm believer in all of it, which is fine. But yeah, it calls into question like so many elements of it. Like was the neighbor aware like of this new backstory for these past 3 days, and then it got erased at the end of the movie, or was she never actually involved with him and he just thinks he was talking to her and he just thinks that all this was happening? And it's not so much that that's important to like tell us necessarily. It's just one of the many things that all of a sudden makes me feel like there was a lot of cheating going on throughout the movie, because if you have this kind of twist, you can just get away with whatever you want. Right? That's how it feels like to me. You don't have to follow the rules. You can just do things at random. And it's not that they didn't have ideas, because I know they wanted to. There's a big set piece in the middle of the movie where he's investigating the cabins where he gets some of the files of the kids, and he like ends up stumbling across like the cult like dancing, or just there's actually just kind of walking in a circle actually around this big campfire. And there's a sort of big set piece moment here where they all turn to look at him, and then he backs away a step, and they all take one step forward, and the sound effect is like, it sounds like an army like stomping down a street at him, and then he runs from them. Like, and it was okay. The scene was kind of ruined for me though, because they did this thing with the flame at one point. The campfire did this like sort of, he got really tall and sort of went into the heavens, and I'm like, no. So when it comes to horror, if you show me something too fantastical, like it loses all of its mystique. It loses all of its appeal. It's why I don't like CG ghosts flying around. For the most part, it's why I don't like other things like that. So there's just this movie. Like I went in expecting to like it because of the buzz, and the opening 20 minutes was solid. But as it went on, it kept doing more and more cliched scenes and more horror set pieces. And then it got to the point where it was unraveling the mystery. And the mystery, once it started to unravel, I'm like, I think I might hate where this is going. And then, would you believe it? I hated where it went.
Like I said, I liked the concept. I didn't like the execution. Like it could have been done so much better.
Was your favorite character the guy at the cult who gave him some information, and he like when he first asked him about like, have you seen Amanda here? He just sort of goes, hmm. It just sort of like he's got this big over the top sort of grin.
No, I think my favorite character was the girl that stabbed her eyes out with the scissors. I kind of liked her until she died.
I mean, I liked her death. I don't know if I liked her so much. Yeah. None of the kids. I think that's one of the problems. Is it maybe if it had made me like Amanda first before she went missing?
Yeah, because you never really meet her before her being missing. So it's hard for you to care about this person. You don't even know what. Yeah.
You get one scene, she's kind of cryptic, and it's one of those things where I'm like, this is one of these movies where there's going to be cryptic shit, and then I'm just going to be annoyed at what the answers are later. Like, it has that kind of vibe the second she starts talking about the mumbo jumbo, and there were still things to kind of like here or there, but like every time it kept coming back round to that, I just got a little bit less interested, more and more, as it went down the rabbit hole. So I don't know. It's a rough time. because I wanted to like it. I really did. Like I kept like giving it the benefit of the doubt, and I kept giving it more and more chances,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just kept doing things I hated,
And it kept going. Like
and
they
it
could have
kept
cut. They
going.
could
Yeah.
have cut. Like I thought it was going to end right when he found out that he wasn't real. I was like, okay, this is the end of the movie. And then it kept going for like another 25 minutes.
This is very true, and there's so much of him. Like I mentioned the big campfire moment, but there's like 10 minutes of him like sneaking around the cabins with his flashlight, looking around for
Mm-hmm.
things. And that's when the teddy bear head moves
Yeah.
behind him. And then there's a whole sequence in his house when he's asleep that night where it ends with the teddy bear being left on his porch, but there's like a whole bit before that with I always said the bye bye man, where the empty man like comes for him in his sleep, and he sort of like wakes up, and he's like freaking out, and then he finds a teddy bear. Um, there's also it's one of the other things about movie making that can really be a problem for a lot of films is the progression from one plot beat to the next, feeling like it like one plot beat justifies the next one, and so on and so on, right? You have like this momentum going through the film. And one of the things that stuck out to me when I was watching this is that once he establishes like the cult a little bit, he goes to the neighbor who he was having the affair with, and he's having some sweet moments with throughout the film. Like maybe they'll forgive themselves for what they've done, and they'll just be happy now and maybe get together or whatever. Um, he goes to her and says, "Is there anyone else here?" And she's like, "No, what's wrong?" And he starts closing all the curtains, and he's like, "Is there anything strange there?" He's like, "We are scaring me. What's going on?" And basically, he's suddenly very concerned that the cult's going to come after her. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out why he thought this. But there was nothing in the previous scenes to suggest that they would target her for any reason.
I don't know. just to add to the runtime that's already too long. I don't know.
Because if he'd found, like, let's say he found something that suggested that a lot of these previous like teenagers who were part of the cult like killed their parents or something like that. That was their final test, is they had to kill their
Mm-hmm.
parents. Like that would lead into him. Okay, she's in danger. I have to go and save her, and I'm in love with her, and all these mixed emotions. But
Or even if they set it up that he thinks that she's in danger and it turns out she's also part of the cult and that she knew what happened to her daughter. She was just pretending. Like that would
yeah,
have been a better, I don't know, at least that would be something unexpected.
it would have been better. I would have still probably just baggaged it in with everything else I didn't like, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that once you start revealing everyone's in on it, the less, again, there's a couple of exceptions where that's really worked in like classic movies, but for the most part, I kind of like, oh, everyone's in on it, like, like it didn't bother me in Hot Fuzz so much because it's a comedy and it's playing with the tropes and it's like poking fun at them,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, when it's like, oh, everyone's in on it, I usually just sort of go like, like I I guess what I'm saying is I don't really like movies where you can't trust like anything that it's doing unless it's done in a certain way. And I guess when I say a certain way, I mean like I like David Lynch movies, right? But David Lynch, yes, okay, obviously traditional rules don't apply when you're watching his
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but his stuff is so rich with subtext that you're trying to kind of like figure out what everything means as you're going, and you sort of like you start off with that feeling right from the get go. For whatever reason, for better or worse, like I really hate movies that are kind of pretending to be in the normal world to begin with, and then kind of slowly you realize that a lot of it can't be trusted. And for the most part, I'm not a fan of that feeling. And again, I'm sure there's exceptions. I'm sure there's examples that I do like, but it's you know what? I never even thought of the Hellraiser sequel comparison, but now that you've said that, all I can think of this movie being is a slightly better version of like Hellraiser 5 and 6.
Yeah. I was thinking Inferno in my head. I was like, Hellraiser Inferno.
Yeah, it, it's a little better. I mean, it's okay. That's maybe a bit unfair. It's probably a lot better because I mean that standard is really low, but it's a better made version of that, right? With better
Mm-hmm.
production value and a bit more style, but fundamentally it like fundamentally it feels so
Mm-hmm.
similar now that I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it. That
Was it 5 or 6 that Kirsty came back and it was her husband?
that was 6,
That
yeah.
was 6. Yeah. Then I think it definitely reminds me 6 even more than 5
Yeah.
because of
Oh,
how that story ended.
no, because when you think about 5 though, 5's whole thing with the corrupt cop ended like I
Wait,
think there's an
which
argument
one?
for both.
One of them ended with somebody thinking that they were alive when they weren't, and I can't remember which one it was.
It's kind of both, to be honest.
Oh, wow. Well, then that's probably why I can't remember.
I mean, like I can't remember that well either, but five definitely had a thing with the corrupt cop where,
Hmm.
like, by the end, it was like he'd done things and like it was all like comeuppance for what he'd done or something. Like it's really bad. It's really bad, and they blur together because like they're bad, but also because they've got all these similar elements after a certain point. But
Even the last one, I turned it off after 20 minutes. Like I was like, "Oh, great, new Hellraiser movie. It's on Netflix." I turned it on, and they show a totally different house, which is not the house on Ludovico Street. And then they show cops, and I was like, "I'm out." No.
I have not had the pleasure yet. I was working through them with Tim, and I think we're on the eighth one when he
Hmm.
gets back. So I'll see how that goes when time comes. I assume not well, but
Well, all I know is that because I only watched the first 20 minutes, so all I can tell you is that they are sticking with the cop thing, investigating.
well, the eighth one's not the last one though. The
No, no, I'm
most
talking about the last one, which was
yeah, that's like the 10th or 11th or something like that.
yeah, yes.
So yeah, sad days,
Hmm.
sad days throughout. Um, yeah, there's so much of this guy just like looking around and reading files or googling things. Oh yes, we
Hmm.
get the Google research scene where he's scanning Wikipedia and stuff. So exciting. It's the best. I'm sick of supernatural horror movies. You know what? Like we need to let the supernatural side of horror that has to like go away for a little bit. Like let's focus on monsters and slashers
Yes, bring back the
and
slashers.
all those things that and just killers in general. Let's go back to focusing on them for a while because I am sick to death of spooky thing with a mythology that they have to research halfway through the
Hmm.
movie. And you mix that with a slightly better version of a Hellraiser, like 5 or 6
Hmm.
premise. I don't know what the internet's on, but this movie isn't that good. It's not
No.
it's not complete trash. Like there's enough skill I think in moments of direction and ideas here or there that I'm not going to completely throw it under the shit bus, but it ain't getting a good rating from me, and I'm not
Mm-mm.
sure how you're feeling about the
No, I'm
overall.
basically going to rate it more based on the actual physical filmmaking because it's a good looking film. The actors are decent.
It's
So
more.
on a technical level, everything looks as it should, but on a writing level, it's terrible.
It looks not bad. I will say
Mm.
that the visuals tend to look, with the exception of when they're using CG, the
Mhm.
visuals look pretty solid for the most part. It's there's the moment in the cave where there's that one beam of light like behind the actor, and he's looking at the because that skeletal statue thing in the wall does look all right. It doesn't look cheap. It
Mhm.
looks like it blends into the scene well. Um, there is one really weird part when they're standing up on top of the mountain where the vista looks very CG and green. Well, not CG, but it looks very green screened.
Mhm.
And even though the rest of the scene looked fine, it was just that one shot. But I think it was intentional because later on, when our main character's looking at the campfire, there's a moment where he looks up at the sky, and like this low angle shot looking up looks very green screened as well. So I think it's actually an intentional thing. Like they're having like they're being affected by the presence of the the force of evil or whatever it is. So I think it's actually an intentional thing to look. It's meant to look kind of weird and like, oh, they're separate from reality now or something like that.
Mhm.
But the first time it happened, I was kind of like, oh, this looks a bit iffy, and I guess it was intentional, but it didn't change the fact that when I saw it, I went, oh, like it wasn't obvious it was doing like a technique. I just thought it looked bad. So, but other than that, though, by and large, it looks solid enough visuals wise. Yes, I'll agree with that. Uh, maybe a little overly edited in places. There's a couple of times where it was cutting a little bit too often during conversations, or
Mhm.
not a big deal, but I was noticing it here or there that maybe it could have done with some longer, uninterrupted shots and things like that. But I, I am nitpicking a little bit with that. I don't think it's like terribly edited or anything like that. Because trust me, I've seen some bad editing, and I'll happily bring it up. In fact, I saw you admit on Twitter this week that you liked the first Suicide Squad movie, which is one of the worst edited films of all time. So I'm just going to throw that in.
Yeah, I, I, I wouldn't say it's the best movie, but I didn't hate it. Like a lot of people really hated
Mm-hmm.
it. Of course, I like the new Suicide Squad way better
Oh,
than
I
the
haven't
original
watched,
Suicide
I haven't
Squad.
watched the new one yet. I'm looking forward
Oh,
to checking it out.
I think you'll enjoy it.
But that first one, oofed. I mean, clearly, I think we're at the point where we don't really want to say anything else about this movie.
No, I'm just I'm trying not to yawn as I talk. Thinking about how boring. Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I just wish this was better. It was so promising. I feel more let down than anything. It's one thing when you watch a movie and it's bad from the beginning, you know what you're getting into. But this wasn't bad from the beginning.
Yeah, I think there's a bit more potential to start, and I think also the buzz told me to
Mm-hmm.
expect something at least decent. And the fact that I was kind of like trying to will that into existence, but then I just hated it the more and more. I mean, hate's a strong word, but I do kind of hate the way some of the plot like beats in this. So yes, I will try and rate it as fair as I can, but I did not like The Empty Man. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry to say it.
Same. And I have
Uh,
no desire to rewatch it.
oh, I definitely don't. Uh, all 2 hours and 17 minutes of the bloody thing. All right, Shasha, would you like to rate the film?
4. And that's just because they put some work into having different locations and different actors, and the lighting looked great to me. I mean, the color grading, I'm basing it only solely on like technical aspects.
Yeah,
The sound was pretty good. So
there's so many horror movies, especially low budget ones, that don't get this stuff right. So I think it's fair to
yeah,
to praise that. If that's the one thing you or the one sort of like collection of things you can say you liked about this, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
yeah.
Like, cause
This filmmaker worked with a lot of skilled individuals to put together a good looking movie, save for the special effects. Like that was just they should have just done practical if they couldn't. Because the thing with CGI is you have to. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. I was gonna say you have to pay to have really good CGI, but I don't know if that's still true because it's actually getting cheaper as the years progress to do it.
no, it's I mean CG. The sad truth about CG is that it just costs more to have better CG because it just means it
Hmm.
takes more time, right? If you want it done in a month, it depends on it. I mean, if you only have one CG shot a month, it's probably plenty of time. But
Hmm.
let's say you've got a reasonable amount of CG. If you only give them a month to do it, you'll get like mediocre standard CG. If you give
Hmm.
them, 6 months to do it, then you'll get really good looking CG. In theory, right?
Hmm.
Like obviously, I'm generalizing a bit, but fundamentally that's why there's certain movies from 20 years ago that have better CG than movies that come out today. Even though the newest Marvel movie should have the most state of the art best CG, but they
Hmm.
actually cheapen out a little bit, and not all of them do. Like even Endgame, which is obviously a really fun movie that everyone pretty much loved when it came out, like some of that big final fight scene, like the background is really obviously green screened, and there's some really obvious just kind of dull looking CG in the background. Uh, and that's one of the most expensive, most profited films of all time, and
Hmm.
it still has that base because it wasn't a priority. So they figured no one's going to care, and I guess enough people don't. But which is a shame. But when it's done well, when you have a James Cameron who is like spearheading it, or you have someone like even what's his face, Neil Blomkamp, who even in
Hmm.
a low budget setting like District 9 had really good effects,
Yeah.
and it still holds up quite well, even though it's like 13, 14, or 12 years old now. So, uh, but yeah. All right, so you give it 4.
Hmm.
I'm yeah, I think 4's kind of what I was thinking as well. I don't want to go much lower than that because from a technical level, certain scenes are fairly solid. I think the directions solid enough. I just kind of hate the script. I hate what the movie becomes the more it goes on. I just kind of hated where it went, and part of that is a taste thing. I would
Hmm.
say, but it doesn't matter. I'm still giving it a 4 out of 10. So there you go. That's The Empty Man. And well, it is better than The Bye Bye Man. Not that much better.
Hmm. Yeah. I
Like,
actually probably would rewatch the Bye Bye Man, but that is more of it's so bad that it's kind of funny.
it's
It's like
also it's
stuff you
also
could laugh at.
it's also only 90 minutes, which is a big point in its favor.
Can you hear that?
That's fine. Cats interrupt the shows all the time. That's
Okay.
fine. We can keep rolling with cat interference. Trust me, my audience is well accustomed to
Mhm.
cats getting in the way. All right, there you go. That's the Empty Man. Disappointing. Disappointing. What do I usually do at this point? I usually thank our Patreon producers, I think that's usually what I do here. So thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Stanley. They are all Patreon producers for the month, but you can support us on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month, and that $1 will get you access to a bonus episode every month. Our first bonus episode did go up already. And the bonus episode each month will actually be the runner-up to the vote that goes up in the $5 tier. The winner of that vote is an episode, which you should have seen by now, I think. Yeah, Blood Red Sky was the winner of the first one, so that was an episode. And then the runner-up of that vote was Untitled Horror Story, so that was the bonus episode, which you get on Patreon or by being a YouTube member. So, yeah. So there's other goodies as well. There's other things at the higher tiers and all sorts, so go and have a look. But of course, you can support the channel and everything that we do for completely free by hitting the like button, subscribing, commenting, dinging the bell for notifications. YouTube channels all, drive all these points home because they do get helped by it. YouTube's system, unfortunately, is the god that we all must worship and offer.
All hail the algorithm.
Yes, all hail the algorithm. What do you call it when you give like a god a gift? It's
like an offering.
Yeah, well, I already said offer. There's definitely another word for it.
A sacrifice.
Yeah, sacrifice. That's why Tim's gone. Tim's not around because I sacrificed him to the YouTube gods. So yeah, check out Patreon and catch the Twitter for all Mail Fuzz movies is @ScreamsMidnight. So check out that. Shasha, feel free to promote your channel.
Seeing that I'm on the Sacred Hockey Match, I had to do one thing since this past Friday was Friday the 13th. I just reviewed all 10 of the first 10 movies of the series.
No, it was not. By the time this goes out, Friday the 13th will have been like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. Well, let me restate that. In case you missed it, 2 weeks ago, I reviewed the whole Friday, not the whole Friday the 13th series, I misspoke, the first 10 movies of the Friday the 13th series. I will revisit the remake, but I'm going to revisit that along with Freddy vs. Jason in October.
That's
so
cool.
Check those out when you get the chance.
Yeah, go do that. There's a link to Sasha's channel in the description, as there always will be on these episodes, so go get clickety. I try to sound cool and I messed it up, and now I'm embarrassed and ashamed of my words and deeds. Okay, that has been the Sacred Hockey Mass. Thank you very much for joining us once again. We'll be back next week with another horror film discussion, and keep watching scary movies. And remember, if you see someone wearing the sacred mask, repeat to yourself, "Hockey season ended months ago."